Today's episode is brought to you by Musical Theater Radio's merch store. Looking for that perfect gift for someone or just want to treat yourself to some great musical theater themed merch? Head to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the All Things Theater button on the homepage and check out all the different designs available. And now, today's interview. Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanoff. If you are looking for a musical to see, today's episode is for you. So if you are in London, UK, May 17th to the June 22nd, 2025, head over to Underbelly Boulevard, Soho to check out the musical Pop Off Michelangelo. To tell us a little bit about himself, his production company, and of course the aforementioned upcoming show, is Blair Russell. Blair, hello.
Hello. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right, now before we get into all the fun stuff, we always like to get to know our guest for the listeners. So I always ask for a 30-second bio. So who is Blair in 30 seconds?
Okay, 30 seconds. Like most people, I started out sort of excited by theater, by being an actor, by being a performer in high school. I very quickly found out that that wasn't for me, that I wasn't great at it, and it actually didn't thrill me as much as I thought. I was really interested in learning more about how everything comes together in the theater. So I started working as a stage manager, went to school at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia for stage management. And then after working as a professional stage manager for a while, realized I didn't love that life, didn't love that idea. So I decided to kind of switch careers, and an opportunity to become a assistant to a producer came up. I took that opportunity, realized I loved the idea of producing, ended up producing in New York, and then started my own production company. And here we are today, working on shows in New York and London and many other places.
Nice. Yeah, sometimes you realize you start with one passion in theater, and then you realize it's not that you want, it's theater in general that you
Yes,
you just fall in love with. Uh,
absolutely.
I'm curious, because obviously you said you're into musicals when you were younger, but is your family theatrical oriented based, or are you kind of like the black sheep, the standout in the family?
It was a total wild card. In fact, I was one of those kids who was totally focused on science and math. I went to a special school for science and math, and it kind of there was just a point where I knew the paths were going to diverge, and I had to make a choice about what I wanted to do in the future. And I was about my junior year of high school that I was like, I don't like science and math. I don't like anything about this. I actually really just like art and theater, and I want to do that. And so my parents, of course, loved that. There were absolutely no problems, and then everything was golden. No, I definitely threw them for a bit because while they are fans of music and television and movies, like we didn't live in a place where that was accessible. They didn't have any experience in the industry. They didn't know anybody, so I was totally having to make it up myself.
Nice. Yes, because parents love when kids go into the arts because that's where all the money is.
Exactly.
Right. So let's talk about, you said you were going to be a performer, didn't do that. Stage manager, you moved into producing. Tell us a little about your early producing days, and then which will move into your production company.
Yeah, so I kind of fell into it. So I was working at a regional theater called Goodspeed Musicals, and I was a production assistant there and stage managing. And a position opened up in the producer's office just for an assistant, answering calls, responding to emails, handling the scheduling. And I thought that, well, I'm already here, and I don't want to work nights and weekends forever for the rest of my life. So why don't I try that? And that was a great job, but mostly it was great because it kind of allowed me to really understand what the work entailed and get excited, particularly because of where I was working, about the idea of developing new things and creating things from scratch and seeing new work to come together. So I started out assisting. I got into the world of sort of working with writers and helping them develop their pieces. And since I understood a bit about the regional side and understood a bit about how new musicals are developed, I thought I could kind of connect to them in that way. So I was doing that sort of freelance when I was living and working in New York, assisting another producer. And then once I left that job, I was kind of like, I need to move on to something else. I don't think just assisting people is really where I want to be. I made a choice to start producing independently. And
Mm.
not everyone does that. Some people are like, let me go into a producing office, let me try to get a position as an associate or something like that. And I just said, no, I'm just gonna do it independently. It'll be fine. So as I like I like to say, I put on my big boy pants and decided to become a producer. I just thought, what shows did I like? What artists did I want to work with? Maybe I'll like reach out to them and see if they'll let me produce their shows. I had no idea what that meant. But I said like, yeah, let me do that. So I reached out to three people, and being very naive in those days, I thought, well, I'll call three people. Maybe one of them will say yes, because obviously I have no experience and I don't know anything. So they're not going to want me to produce. So of course they all said yes. So I immediately had three projects that I decided I was the producer of, having no idea what that even really meant. Simultaneously, I was asked to join a show, a play, a Broadway play, Slave Play, as a co-producer, and that was my first co-producing experience as well. So working on raising money and kind of getting into that world. So all of those things happened in the span of about a month. I went from having no shows to
Wow.
having four shows that I was working on, raising money, developing projects, and kind of just learning on the fly. And of course, we talk about the word producer and what that title is, but I think almost everybody who works in the theater has been a producer at some point. If you
Mm.
ever put on a play yourself or with a group of people, you were a producer. So I can go back and talk about the shows I did in college and the random events that I scheduled and created, or the concerts that I put on, or me and my sister performing in, the living room where we were literally making programs and posters and putting together the set list, and like that's all producing. So who knows where it really began.
Nice. Excuse me. Tell us a little bit about some of the shows. What attracts you to a show?
Yeah, you get asked this question all the time as a producer, and I really need to figure out the short answer. I had an answer that I used to use, which I think still applies, but it's not super specific. I used to say, I love work that takes classic stories and presents them in a new way,
Mhm.
or takes these new stories and uses the traditional tools that we have to kind of tell them. And I think that that's always really exciting, the sort of juxtaposition of those things. But you kind of just feel it. You kind of get an excitement. I love shows that have an edge or a bite. I love things that lean into maybe unexpected comedy or dark comedy. The more I produce, the more projects that I get excited about. I see myself finding weird patterns between them. Like a lot of the shows deal with religion. I don't know what that's about. A lot of the shows obviously deal with queerness. A lot of the shows deal with heaven and hell. Like there's these weird trends that happen, and I don't go out to the world saying like I really want to do a show that is about religion, that's about this, that's about. But I find myself sort of being interested in things where people are questioning um, power, where they're questioning the way that things are, where they're questioning beliefs that they've held. So those types of things excite me. But yeah, so something with a little bit of a bite, a little bit of an edge that surprises you. And I just think just appeals to a large group of people, and makes them walk out of the theater and go like, okay, okay, I'm learning something. I'm thinking about things. I want to discuss this.
No, we'll get to pop off Michelangelo, but just before that, some of the shows that you've worked on that excited you that you did take on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first few shows that I'm developed and actually was able to do a West End concert of it in 2023 was a show called For Tonight. And what is so interesting about this show, and kind of thinking back to it, was like I always loved the music of the show. The writers I had known for about 7 years before I actually took it on. It was a show, one of those small shows that I originally found when I was just an assistant reading scripts and be kind of working as the literary desk at the time. And I loved the music. I remember thinking about the music all the time. And, in those days, you didn't really have new musicals that were making concept albums and streaming it. So I just had to kind of like remember the version that we did. And that show that spoke to me so much, the way that good experiences in the theater can be memories that people hold for a lifetime. I think that that's important. I think that's what makes something really into the canon of musical theater. And so I said, yeah, I want to do this show. What's interesting about the show is that it's about a group of people in Wales and Romani people, and kind of the experiences between these two communities and how they intersect and how they impact each other, and how, communities can become scapegoats for problems and all these other things. And that's just not really something that I had any direct experience with, but the larger themes spoke to me. And the idea that you can have this beautiful score and you can have this story that is both challenging but also kind of uplifting was really exciting for me. Another musical that I worked on and have been developing and had a great experience has literally taken me around the world is a musical called Lizard Boy.
Mhm.
And that's just a show. It's a show about a boy was kind of a young man when the story starts, but when he was in kindergarten, a dragon came out of Mount St. Helens, and the military came, killed it on the playground. Dragon blood went everywhere, got on him, and so as he grew up with this green lizard skin, and obviously felt like an outsider. And it's sort of this comic book superhero origin story. And again, it's something that talks about sort of being an outsider and being different, but also like finding community, finding your people, finding strength, challenging what is. And again, it also really leans into great music that kind of sits outside of your traditional musical theater. And that's a trend that I kind of see in all the work that I'm attached to. I'm probably a music person first. Like my favorite thing is music,
Mhm.
followed by plays. But if you can combine those two things, and do them extremely well, then you have yourself a great musical. So musicals are third, but they can still be first.
We actually play four tonight on the station. So yeah, it's a great show. So
Yeah,
for sure.
love
So
that show.
so so let's migrate over to the UK. How did you get, you're based in the States to start with. How did you get involved more with the UK side?
There's kind of multiple threads to that. So the first is that before I kind of started producing, I was involved in some projects in the UK as just like an investor, like getting
Mhm.
what little money together I could and getting one unit and a show to kind of start to get on the inside. I think the first show I ever did that for was Gypsy in the West End with Imelda Staunton, which was an amazing experience. It was a very successful show. And then after that, I did a production of Showboat, which was so beautiful and a complete flop. But those experiences kind of got me over to the UK initially. I'm also married to a Brit, so I have like an inherent connection to the UK and like going to London and family over there. So that it all kind of made sense in a weird way. Like I started working over there. I had this connection. And the first show that I decided to do there was Lizard Boy at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Mhm.
And it just felt like that show fit at the Fringe so well. I had visited the Fringe, I'd been there, and so I just wanted to do it. I wanted to produce at the Fringe. I wanted to know what that was like, and that sort of opened the door. And then once you're there, you're like, well, I might as well do a workshop of this musical, and then I might as well do a concert of this musical next year, and I might as well bring another musical over here to develop. I might as well go to the Fringe every year, and you just kind of start doing things, and it really the connections happen, people get excited about the work, and because it's just a little bit of a smaller geography, it's very easy to say, oh, I did something at the Fringe and now I want to do it in London or vice versa. And yeah, it keeps calling me back.
Very nice. I'm curious because you have feet in both sides of the Atlantic. Do you find that there's a difference in producing in the US, say, versus the UK? And I'd be curious about that.
Yes, I think especially when you're developing new work, it is a little bit easier in the UK. There's just structures and rules within the industry that make it a little bit less taxing. I also think that the sort of the people who work in the industry in the UK for whatever reason, we could chalk it down to their access to healthcare and maybe having to like worry a little less about, taking on work or doing like, workshops or readings or little
Mhm.
things and not thinking so much about the like larger career and the larger pathway and is this going to take me away from something else, that you find people are very sort of open and active and excited to work, especially in new projects, and you build these very, very quick communities. Whereas there's a lot of, because of the cost, there's a lot of high pressure in New York when you're making something, not in other communities in the US, but particularly in New York, where if you're going to have a reading, you're going to have a workshop, you're going to do this, you have to get all the best people who are absolutely going to like take the show to Broadway. And there's so much money involved and there's so much logistics and the unions and all of this that you just have to know, like, feel in your heart that this is going to be worth the effort, that this is definitely going to be the thing that is going to be the big success for you. Whereas you can take more chances in the UK.
Mhm.
Also, younger producers are given much more opportunity in the
Mm.
UK. and it has to do with the sort of structure of their venues, where you have a lot of venues, what would have been, let's say, off-Broadway venues or the equivalent, where they will program shows for 4 or 5, 6 weeks at a
Mm.
time. And so they have a constantly revolving slate of shows every year. It's like having the nonprofit off-Broadway season,
Yeah.
but it's open to any producer who wants to do that. And there's, 10, 15 theaters in London that operate that way. So if you're a young producer with an idea, you can go and raise just enough money to do 5 weeks of a show, which if you wanted to do the same thing, even off-Broadway in New York, would cost you 5, 10 times as much. And there's fewer venues that are open to young producers. It's just not, you just don't have access to them in a way. So it makes it easier to sort of just jump in and say, yeah, 6 months from now, I want to be doing a new musical that I just discovered. Right. So it is different.
That's that. You know what? Thank you for that information because I'm always curious. We all live in different world. I'm in Canada, the States, the UK, Australia, all these we have the common arts. We all love that. But yeah, how we go about it and the different things that bring it. So thank you for telling us about that. Any listeners, there's your opportunity. Take advantage of that. So let's lead into Pop Off Michelangelo. Tell us a little bit how you got involved with that and the process to getting it produced over there.
I want to say, yeah, it's definitely the strangest origin story I have for being involved in a musical. So I am involved in a writer's retreat every year. I go to the Johnny Mercer Writers Grove, which happens to take place at Goodspeed Musicals. And in that writer's retreat, I tend to meet about 30 writers. It's sometimes like 15 or 16 projects. I'm there as a sort of producer in residence, working as a dramaturg, but really on the creative side, but kind of more how that intersects with the business and career and pathways and development and being that type of resource for the writers, since that's more my area of expertise. I met the writer Dylan McMorell there, and when he came to the Writers Grove, he had, I want to say, one song, maybe two at that time. And he had a synopsis because when the shows are selected, they don't necessarily have to have a draft. They can literally just have an idea. And he came with this idea, and we talked quite a bit about where the show was and kind of what he wanted it to be, which I think had sort of radically shifted from even his original idea that he'd pitched. And I will totally own up to this, and I'm saying this publicly, and I never do this because I am in front of all of these writers and all of these shows, and they're aware that I'm a producer. It is my job to genuinely be very neutral because obviously I'm not gonna be able to take on all the shows. So I just like if I want to talk to anybody, I wait till after the 4 weeks is done. But I was just so kind of thrilled by this idea of the show. I kind of let it slip out one day at breakfast because we're sort of housed in this community of houses, and every writer gets a house, and we have breakfast in the morning and we have gatherings in the evenings. And I just said like, oh, I want to take the show to the Fringe, and I said it, and then it was out, and then I couldn't really take it back because I did, but also I was like, yeah, you know what? I do. And the thing is, the deadline for the Edinburgh Fringe, if you want to get into the sort of last sort of release and get registered, it's like April. It's like early April. And so I was like, well, this was in February. So if you can turn this from two songs and an outline to a full draft of a musical by the March dates where we can properly get it marketed, then I'll do it. So we went away. I said, let me know. And he delivered a draft in March. And I was like, yeah, this is not only is it like good enough for the Fringe, I think this is great. We went to the Fringe cold. We went straight into rehearsal. We didn't do a reading. We didn't do a workshop. We just put it on its feet and said, let's see what happens. And
Yeah.
the one thing I did say to Dylan at the time is, I said, this is going to be the worst producing and the worst production of anything anybody has ever done. Do you still want to do it? And he's like, yes. So we went, and of course it wasn't that, but it was like, let's set the
Yeah.
expectation. We just don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea, but let's see if people are responsive to the material as I was. And luckily they kind of were. So yes, it's very different. I often spend 5, 6 years developing shows. Those first shows that I started with still in development. I have other new shows that are kind of starting their journey. So to go from literally a year ago nothing to now having a production in London is pretty wild.
Sometimes you just gotta throw yourself into the fire and see what happens. And sometimes you get burned, sometimes you just warm yourself and something's cooking. And
Yeah,
so
it's a little singe, the fingertips.
exactly. So when was let me tell me a bit about the production history. When was that you went to the Fringe and then up to the point where we are now?
Yeah, we went to the Fringe last summer, August of 2024. We did an entire run at the Fringe. We rehearsed in London for just 2 weeks. 2 weeks before, we did one preview performance in London at the Other Palace studio. We got all our stuff in a van, went over there. It's not even like a traditional theater. It doesn't have a backstage. It doesn't have wings. We made it work, and good thing because also at the Fringe you kind of have to make things work. It really prepared us for that. So we did one preview and then got ourselves on the train and drove the stuff up to the Fringe, and we performed for the whole month, every day except I think it was August 15th. You get one day off, one Monday off during the Fringe where you're not performing. We worked with a great group of people. Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago, and it was last summer.
Wow. And how far along are you in the process? Because it's 2 months from this recording that the show's going up. You've obviously got your directors and all that fun stuff. And
Yeah.
have you cast? I was curious where you are in the process.
Yeah, we have our team together. Our creative team is together. We've obviously announced and have our marketing running. We're in the process of casting and kind of tying those things up. Negotiating with agents and talking to them and getting all those the T's and I's and crossed and dotted. And we will begin our rehearsals on April 21st. So we're just about a month away from rehearsals. But again, saying things that I would never say, knock on everything, but this is the often with developing new musicals and the sort of things that I do, it feels like you're jumping from place to place and you've given yourself a month to get everything ready or a couple weeks to get everything ready, or an idea pops
Mhm.
up or an opportunity presents itself, and you have to take the opportunity because you don't know when you're going to get another one. And for once, I feel like we sort of started, have given ourselves ample time, at least ample time for things to go wrong and not derail everything. So it feels like we're in a good place. What's really nice is working with a lot of the same people makes it so much easier. You have a shorthand, you have an understanding of
Mhm.
things that you wanted to change from the last production and things you want to do differently. We've been talking about this version of the show since October, and doing it at this venue. And so we've had time. We've had time. In the meantime, I've worked on like other shows and other projects and then on these other things. So it's we're in a good place. We're in a really good place.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about the creative team, who they are that be helming this show?
Yeah, so the director, Joe McNeese, is someone that I've known again, it's really only been about a year and a half, I would say. We met in fall of 2023. At that time, we were discussing a project that I ended up also producing in London and at the Fringe last year while doing this new musical. I was doing another show called DIVA Live from Hell.
Mhm.
Um, and Joe was the director of that, and he's really creative, and, like a great person to work with. And when I wanted to take Michelangelo up to the Fringe, one of the big challenges at the Edinburgh Fringe is housing. It's your most expensive cost.
Mhm.
And so, being a good producer, I said, if I just hire all the same people, I can do two shows and not have to pay for more housing. So basically, the entire creative team on both shows was the same, in fact. And luckily, because they're all creatively like talented human beings and just really amazing people, we were able to somehow get through that summer. I have to say, we had a Pop Up Michelangelo, which was at 6:30 and ran for an hour, and then Diva was at 8:30 and ran for an hour. And you think there's an hour between the shows. Great, except it takes you 15 minutes because you have 15 minutes to load out of one show, and that's if you're running on time. And
Yeah.
then you have 15 minutes to get into the other show. So it was often like we had 30 minutes in between one show coming down and going to the other one. And we would do our sort of production meetings after performances and after text after both shows. So we would collect all the information for both shows, and then we would go and sit down as a team and be like, wait, that was a lighting cue, but I don't remember what show it was in. Does anybody know what show I'm talking about? Because we would just like sort of leave the actors wave and go like, okay, we gotta go to our other show. But the team was great. my general manager is Paul Verides, who is a producer and general manager in the UK and has a ton of experience doing like small, scrappy new musicals and kind of growing into bigger things, into tours. Has worked a lot at places like the Playhouse, which do new musicals, and then has also done the Fringe and came with Fringe with us. Like I mentioned, Joe McNeese is the director of this production. We'll be working with one of my favorite lighting designers, Adam King. Obviously, Dylan back as the writer, book music and lyrics, which is no easy feat. Aaron Sood will be our music director, and he's a really talented music director, also a writer himself in the UK, but really understands what we're trying to do with the music, which is blend, a live band and the sort of pop sensibilities and recordings and like tracks that we need to blend together because we did the whole show to tracks at the Fringe, which 0 out of 10, don't recommend. But we made it work. And so now we're kind of blending this world of musical theater and pop. And so having Aaron on is really, really great. So we have this great team of people who are coming back to sort of work on the show. Great marketing team, Madewell Marketing. Kate Morley is doing our PR. And so just people that we know, we love, we're excited to work with. And getting the band back together, which is my favorite thing in a theater. That I tell people I produce for two reasons. One, because I like planning parties. I like planning opening night parties. So I've had to make a show to have an opening night party. And really, I like to hang out with my friends and also occasionally produce theater in between. So being able to work with people I love is very exciting.
Nice. I know you have a good team because I've interviewed Dylan for
Yes.
Lewis and Clark, and I'm pretty sure I've interviewed Aaron as well. I know I play his sidekick in a few of his shows. So yeah, it's you've got a good team there. I totally agree. That's awesome. So how do people get tickets for this? The socials, the websites, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, popoffmichelangelo.com. That'll take you everywhere. We're also on Instagram and TikTok at popoffmichelangelo. I'm a big fan of social media as a sort of access point for younger fans and people who maybe don't get an opportunity to see a lot of shows or be involved in the process. So we're very sort of like open door about sharing, what's going on in our world and trying to get the content out there. So you can go to our socials, go to our website, and you're able to get tickets for the Underbelly Boulevard Run. Tickets start at £10. I think that accessibility is important. During the entire run, we will always have a £15 standing room ticket in the theater. This is something that I never want to change. I know that, dynamic pricing and all this is such a big thing in the theater these days, but I just think that you have to have something that is accessible to people and not always be chasing the highest dollar or
Yeah.
highest pounds. So you can get those tickets on our website and at the Underbelly Boulevard website. You'll be able to get them in person. We'll have all kinds of opportunities to get them and try to be out into the world. The tickets for the first week, our previews are selling very quickly because we've priced those lower. Our top ticket price for that I think is £35, just to say like, hey, come join us. Take a chance on us. So if you want those tickets, you got to get them soon. But then after that, we'll have a run and there'll always be those £15 tickets available for people. So yeah.
Nice. And your website so people can learn more about you and your
Yes.
production team.
BlairRussellProductions.com. There I put all the shows that I'm working on, that I'm developing, that I've been involved in the past. I like to go in there and just kind of look at, sometimes it reminds me. Sometimes I work on so many things, I'm like, what have I done? What am I doing? So it's nice to go and sort of see what I'm working on. And then the writers often email me and remind me that yes, I did promise to produce this and make a production happen. Get right on that. So I'm working on a number of new musicals, which you can check out there. A musical comedy about the Salem witch trials called Salem. You can find out more information about Lizard Boy, and there will always be new shows popping up. There's information about For Tonight, Pop Off Michelangelo, Diva, and plenty of others.
Well, Blair, thank you very much for coming on today, and congratulations on all the shows you've worked on. Thank you for being a producer for new works. As writers, it's the hardest thing to do. We concentrate on the arts and we forget about the business side of show business. And we need people who are passionate about you and don't want to be stage managers anymore or performers, and want to support us. So from a personal standpoint, thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, I people ask me about it, and it really came out of this idea that when I was sitting there looking at all these shows that I saw these writers working on passionately, thinking, these are amazing. Why isn't anybody producing this? What? And then, you do that thing where you look around and you say, I guess it's got to be me. There's no special skill to being a producer. It's just passion and desire and tenacity and saying, like, yeah, I'm going to get this thing over the line. So anybody can be a producer, and a lot more people should, because it's a challenging job. I will admit it is a challenging job. It is not for the faint-hearted, but it is worth it. So
Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Blair, for coming on, introducing yourself, and pop-up Michelangelo as well.
thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. So we were just speaking with Blair Russell, telling us all about Pop-Up Michelangelo. So again, if you are in London from May 17th to June 22nd, 2025, head over to Underbelly Boulevard, Soho to check out that show, and always support new works, because today's new works are tomorrow's classics. Tune in next week as we speak with another guest or guests about their life, love, and passion. That is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanoff. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.